Today's guest on the EOR podcast is living proof that strength isn't just physical, it's transformational. From a 20-year career in UK law enforcement to becoming one of Britain's strongest women, Zoe Thompson has redefined what it means to rise. Now a powerhouse coach, speaker, and philanthropist, she's helping others build unshakable confidence from the inside out. This is more than muscle. This is mindset. Let's welcome the unstoppable Zoe Thompson to the Effort Over Results podcast. Let's go. Zoe Thompson, welcome to the EOR podcast. I'm super excited to have you here today. I saw your profile and I knew that I had to have you on the show largely at first because my entire life has been spent in the gym. And when I saw the Strongwoman competitions that you take part in, it reminded me of my old coach who actually took part in the strongman competitions back in the 1980s. And I thought, what a great opportunity for me to be able to talk to someone who now takes part in those things. But I really want to talk about your life story and really dig deeper into that and understanding how coming to strongwoman lifting into the powerlifting world, what that transition looked like. So my first question, Zoe, and welcome to the show, is can you take us back to the moment that, when I say your life changed, that shift from where you were to now the path of strength training and then self-transformation into becoming a coach, not only in the gym, but also to people personally one-to-one?
So I'm not sure there was one moment. I think there were probably lots of moments that led up to it. So I think, as you've alluded to, life was very different for quite some time. And so we very sadly lost a friend of ours in the London bombings. And I remember sitting at her funeral and thinking, okay, I'm going to need to make some changes. I need to make some difficult decisions and I need to make some changes. And I think lifestyle was a big part of that. And I found very quickly that, I was sporty as a kid anyway, but I did find very quickly that it's so addictive, isn't it, sport, that once you start achieving, it's like, okay, well, if I can do that, what else can I do? And it just kind of took off really quickly. And then I think it's just a number of events. And I think the more you say yes to things, the more opportunities come your way, the bigger that comfort zone grows. And suddenly the things that other people are looking at and thinking, wow, you're doing that. And you're thinking, yeah, but it's just the next step to this thing. So I think we talk about growth mindset and seizing those opportunities and coming out of your comfort zone. I think I talk about this a lot with other people, that those endorphins of doing something different and like that rush of adrenaline when you do something different for the first time, I think it becomes quite addictive sometimes. And it's like, okay, what else can I do? So yeah, I don't think it was one particular thing. I think it was a series of events, I think.
I love what you said about just doing things and the opportunity that comes from that. And I believe opportunity comes in every conversation. It comes in every activity and every action that we do. But more specifically, I wanted to ask you a question. You'd mentioned you weren't very sporty as a kid. So when did you start getting involved in being active? Because my wife and I, as parents, basically said we wanted our children to be active year-round, regardless of what that was, and doing something creative year-round. So it creates a well-rounded child. Whether that turned out well or not remains to be seen. But let's go back to your childhood. I mean, you weren't sporty as a child. When did you start to get involved in sports, or did you mean that you just weren't very good at sports? Explain that.
I think, we did lots of sports as kids, but I wouldn't have described myself as competitive. I enjoyed the challenge of it. I enjoyed being outside. I enjoyed the fun element. And I think that's something that came back in my adult years. And I say now, this year I'm challenging myself to do something very fun. Each month I'm entertaining the inner child. And I think there's something about running around in the fresh air, whether it's as a young child or as a teenager in sports, or even as an adult, when you get that opportunity. I think that There's something very freeing about that. I didn't particularly enjoy sitting in the classroom. So I think if anything, being outside in sports was a bit of an escape for that. But yeah, the competitive element is an interesting one, because even when I was competing, there were other things about the competitions that I perhaps thrived off of, thrived in, rather than the actually being there to win. I think it was more like just pushing myself and seeing what I could achieve. So, I mean, my sister and I both were in different sports teams, but I think it was more the social element more than the sport itself. I think we just enjoyed being outside, and I think that team environment. So interestingly, never went back to team sports after school, and found other ways of getting involved. So it's just interesting how it evolves, isn't it, over time?
Yeah. You have children yourself, right? You have a son
Yeah.
and just a son?
Yeah, I have a son. He's 23 now. Yeah, so
Okay.
yeah, an adult
That's
son.
I can relate to that. My children are in their 20s now as well. When your son was growing up, what was your message to him about being active and physical? Because a lot of parents do not like competitive sports, right? And they feel that it breeds, a negative mindset for kids to be too competitive. I think being competitive is important, but what was your mindset as a mother to your son when he was growing up in terms of just being active?
For me, it was really important for him. So, like in my 20s, I was really overweight. And that was for two reasons, really. Less active, because I was working full time and had a young child. And the other side was just really not understanding the food and nutrition elements. So I think being active was really important. And I think for him growing up, I wanted him to learn how to eat well, but also how to be active. So he started jujitsu when he was 5 or 6. And a lot of the reason behind that was, I think martial arts has a great way of teaching discipline and mental control. And I think for me, when he showed an interest in that, I was quite relieved that it was something that I thought would be really good for him off the mats as much as on the mats. So he was a tall kid, like early on, like he was always one of the taller children. So for him, I think it taught him that discipline, it taught him that level of control, and the instructors were great male role models. So that was another tick in the box for me. And he enjoyed jujitsu. He was always up there ready for training. But it wasn't until he found basketball that he really found his thing. Like, I mean, the minute he found basketball, that was it. He lives, sleeps, and breathes it, and still does. So I think jiu-jitsu is very much that individual element, and basketball is very different. And I think the team dynamic ticked even more boxes for me as a parent. You've got great male role models, so that was a win. You've got the team dynamic, the competitive dynamic, regular training, regular events, and it's given him some huge opportunities. I mean, he's 23 now, but he's been to the States for a year, he's played in Tunisia for a year, he's been in different cities in the UK. So I think for me, there was just seeing that passion. I think it's not just the active element. I think that's obviously a big part of it, but I think there's so many other boxes that it ticks in terms of becoming a well-rounded individual, as you said, with your children as well. I think, yeah, I do question, and we have this conversation, who would he have grown into had he have not been in that environment, within that sport environment? And yeah, I think that's a big question that we will never know the answer to, but I think basketball has really helped to shape him into the young adult that he is now.
Yeah, I believe that, and I go back to what I'd said about my wife and I raising the children, being active year round and creative year round. But I think it's also important, if you are going to be active, to have that opportunity to do something individually, like you said, like martial arts. I know track and field for myself was my individual sport, athletics, but then also doing a team sport, because it teaches collaboration, it teaches teamwork, discipline. What would you say to a parent who was opposed to putting their children in competitive, organized sport?
I think I would be intrigued as to what they have concerns about, because I think from my experience, that environment has taught a lot of life skills. You learn a lot of life skills as a parent sitting on the sideline of competitive sports when your children are playing, that's for sure. But I would be intrigued as to what the concern was, in what their fear is, or what their concern is about what's going to happen, or how that might influence their child's upbringing. Because from my experience, I've only seen those good things, and I think it teaches some self-constraint within that competitive environment, and how you deal with losing and how you deal with winning, and being a graceful winner and a graceful loser. And I think how you deal with the adversity of those challenges. We've had years where my son's been on the bench and he's been that development year, as they call it. And there's years where he's been in the starting five and he's had a little bit more pressure to perform. And I think both of those years have taught him something different. And I think there's skills there that go into the toolbox for the life skills as much as they are on court. And so I think I would have that conversation around everything that they are learning through that sport, not just the obvious teamwork and the discipline of training, but also, the adversity and overcoming the adversity, and how they deal with things, and how they learn about how other people deal with those things as well. I think I would share those experiences and say it's more than just the 40 minutes between the two whistles. There's a lot more to that, and there's a lot more that they learn that will help them in life, and not just in that sport.
Yeah, I would be curious as well as to that mindset, why a parent would not want their children to be active. I understand when parents say they don't want their children in organized competitive sport, and maybe that stems from, a bad experience they had as a child, growing up. But I still think it's important for parents to understand the importance and the benefits of children just being active in general. And it really saddens me today to see physical education classes being taken out of the schools, because they were saying, well, the children are getting enough, activity time during recess and during breaks, and they're on their own sports teams and so forth, so we don't need to have the class in school. But there is that group of children who don't get any activity at all, and having that in the schools is very important. Let me switch gears a little bit here. Let's talk about your weight loss journey. And I think I did the math correctly. It had said you had lost somewhere near 6 stone. And I believe that equates to about 40 kilograms.
Yeah.
I think that's 84 pounds, correct?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. My maths is not my strong
A
point
stone is
anyway.
14 pound, no?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And if you don't mind me asking, how do you, because I come from a childhood where I was the largest kid on the playground too. Not only just the tallest, but the biggest. And the reason why I think I was 185 pounds, so roughly 90 kilo at the age of 12, was because my mother, a single mother, it was comfort food, right? That's how she showed love, was we ate together a lot, as a single mother and child. But talk to me about your journey, and how you feel like you got to a point where you recognized, okay, this isn't healthy. I need to change things. What did that look like for you, Zoe?
And my weight gain happened very quickly. So I had been active. So up until getting married, having my son, I had been active. I was going to the gym, worked out regularly. It's not similar, but in terms of my relationship with food, growing up, we grew up, and I think I'm that generation. I think this is quite typical of my generation here. We grew up where you ate at the same meal time, your plates were dished up. So you never decided how much food went on your plate. The plate was dished up, and there was an expectation you finished everything on your plate, and then you had pudding afterwards. I've had this conversation with my mom since, and bless her, she recognizes that probably wasn't the best thing, but it was with the best of intentions at that time. That's just how it was. You ate at 5 o'clock, whether you were hungry or not. You ate what was put on your plate, regardless of how hungry. We didn't learn to make those decisions around food. And my sister has had similar challenges. So I found when I moved out, food became very exciting because we had very similar foods to choose from as a child. So going to the big supermarket and having lots of different foods to choose from was really exciting for me. And so I just had that freedom of choice, which I hadn't had before. And my weight gained very, very quickly. And once I became pregnant with my son, obviously then not exercising as much and a very limited lifestyle around that, it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. When I came out of that marriage, there was a lot of work I needed to do, not just the physical work, but I think just getting myself back into a better place. And so the physical side seemed like the easier one out of all of the things that I needed to work on. And, giving up smoking and then getting active again. And at that point, the only real thing I could do was go for a run, and my son would ride his bike because it was just the two of us at that point. And he was still quite young, so he would ride his bike and I would run. And so that's really where it started. And then as he got older, I was able to go to the gym a little bit more, and the weight loss came quite quickly. And then I really worried about regaining the weight, which I think is what a lot of people experience. I lost the weight and I was just really worried. I was seeing other people around me lose weight, gain weight, lose weight, gain weight. And I really didn't want to get into that cycle. So I kind of replaced it with exercise. And it was in the gym that I met my PT, and my PT said, look, if you really want to kind of work on your size and keep that weight off, one of the best ways to do that is to lift weights. And this was 10, 15 years ago. So women lifting was not such a big thing back then. So yeah, he said, come to the gym and I'll show you around the weight section. And that's kind of where that journey then started. But I think there was a lot of work to do. But it did seem that weight loss was probably the easier one because it's you eat less, you move more. It felt like that was simple. I mean, it wasn't simple, but in terms of looking at the journey of what I needed to do, it felt like the easiest one out of all of them to tackle.
You had mentioned, getting out of a marriage. I know in reading your profile and bio that there was an abusive relationship there. How did that, if you don't mind me asking, how did that affect your mindset? Did it influence your decision to embrace, lifting and being more healthy and the weight loss? Like, how did those all play together?
And I think coming out of that marriage, I had completely lost my sense of identity. I think it's interesting looking back on it now and conversations that I have now. I think you learn to appease the other person. You learn to try and find that quiet life. And in doing that, you don't live perhaps in the way that you would want to. And so I think for me, it was kind of a build from the ground upwards. That's why I called my business Phoenix, because it really was a case of, okay, we're almost starting from scratch here. Okay. And if I'm going to do that, what do I want to be? Who do I want to be? Yeah. And trying to see that as an opportunity of, okay, this is starting fresh. So what do I want to build myself into? Like, how do I want life to be? What is important to me? So I think there were lots of questions that I needed to sit down and answer and really work out what was important, and what was important to me, and who did I want to be for me? Who did I want to be for my son? And, where do you even start with that? So I think there was just a real loss of identity, I think, and certainly not living in alignment with what was important to me and my values, which again is probably why it's so important to me in the work that I do now, the values work and the identity work, and living in alignment with what's important to you, because I know what it feels like to not be in that place, and I wouldn't want anyone else to go through that. So I think it's that element of, just if you're starting from the ground and working upwards, you get to recreate. And so that for me was a real opportunity to kind of draw the line behind that and think, right, okay, day one, week one, where do we go from here? And yeah, it's been I have zero complaints. It's been a fantastic journey since.
Obviously, the name of this show is Effort Over Results, and it's something that we preach and try to message out there that while results are are great, and setting goals is fantastic. It's really just about the effort. Like the only thing you can control in life is your attitude and your effort. And I know that sounds a bit cliche, but it's true. And you can't influence the outcome. You can't influence how other people are going to react or respond to your journey. You can't influence anything other than the work you put in. And so we preach that it's just about the effort. So when you decided to move towards a healthier lifestyle, getting involved in lifting, and like you said, drawing that line behind you so you don't go back. What was the hardest part of the effort part? Because I think a lot of people and people who listen to this show, they focus so much on, well, I need to lose so much weight. They put a number on it. They look at the scale daily, the number of pounds or kilos that they're lifting in the gym. It's like, just do the work. Just have a plan and just do the work daily. It's just daily, consistent effort. So during the beginning of that journey for you, Zoe, what was the hardest part of maintaining that discipline and the motivation to keep going?
I think the hardest part initially was it was just so different to the life that I had been living. It felt so weird. It was almost like, oh, okay. And almost having to remind myself that that was what I was doing now of, okay, you go to follow that routine. We're creatures of habit. And if we're not focused, it's so easy to fall back into the old ways of doing things. So I think for me, just those initial days of, like, okay, no, this is what we're doing now. Like, we're not doing that this evening. This is what we're doing. And doing what I said I was going to do, which, to be fair, is something I am very good at. Like, a lot of people will tell you that I'm really stubborn because once I've said I'm going to do something, it's going to happen. So I kind of knew, because I know what I'm like, I kind of knew that once I'd made that decision and I committed to it, that was going to be it. It was just then really fighting those urges to go back to the easier and old way of doing things rather than sticking with it. But I kind of also knew that once I made that start, I would be okay. I just didn't know that how far it was going to end up going. And that's why what I loved about your podcast is the effort over results, because all of the results that I had were never, that was never the plan. They were all things that happened as a result of the effort that I put in. So it's that, I think that's what really resonated with me about your podcast, was the fact that everything for me was all about just focus on what you can do, focus on the input, create that routine around habits and structure, the input, and the results will look after themselves, and they will either happen or they won't, or they're going to happen on their own timeline. And you have to worry about what you can influence and control rather than what you can't. And so much of my journey has been about committed to it, showed up, put the work in, and then incredible things happened. But I didn't ever sit there and think, right, I want to compete at Europe's Strongest Woman, and I want to get promoted to this level, or I want to create my own business. I didn't sit down and create those goals. Right. I had opportunities come my way. I committed to them, showed up and put the work in, and then these incredible results happened. So I think some people see it as a bit of a backwards way of doing it. And also as a coach, most people expect me to have had 3-year, 5-year goals. And that's what I set out to do. And I'm like, no, it didn't happen like that at all. And still doesn't. I still don't set 3 to 5-year goals.
You said it earlier, but I want to reinforce something you said, and I believe it too, that just take every opportunity you can to try different things. And just say yes to, multiple opportunities, to different, places that you can go, different experiences you can have, because you don't know how it will change you. And you don't know, but once again, like I said, you can only put one foot in front of the other and keep moving forward. And then the universe or God, or however you want to describe it, kind of takes care of the rest. Like you said, you didn't plan to go into the Strongwoman competition. You didn't plan to go into that. You just, I need to lose some weight. I want to go to the gym. I'm going to start. And then it just happens. Interesting story. My daughter, who was she's 24 now. She was a very good athlete in high school. She was a discus champion, went to the States on a scholarship. COVID hits. They stop competing. She comes home, doesn't go to the gym for 3 years. basically just sacked her, and she had gained a bunch of weight, and I thought, and just poor eating habits and everything, and I just thought, I was so worried for her, and I kept, as a good controlling father does, I kept telling her how these choices weren't good for her, and and so forth. But I want to shorten the story. It took me realizing that I needed to back off and say nothing and let her figure it out, for her to make those changes. And I think that's something that all people can learn in general. Definitely parents can learn that sometimes you need to let your children fail forward, figure it out for themselves, get to a point where they know that, you know what, I need to change something here, because the pain of staying in this position is far worse than the pain of changing.
Yeah.
So that spurs me on to a question, though, because I thought about this. You had mentioned earlier about 10, 15 years ago when you started the sport that there were not a lot of females involved. And I would say certainly not prior to 2000. It was very rare to see women in the gym, and certainly not doing strength competitions. What is the importance of females being involved in, or sorry, let me change the question, because I think there's a lot of people out there and a lot of women out there that don't think that women should be in the gym gaining muscle, gaining that kind of strength. Like it's just not a female thing to do. What would you say to those detractors who say that lifting and being in the gym is not for females?
Interesting as it is, I've never had a conversation with somebody who feels like that, who's been able to put an
Yeah, it's better.
argument forward that has, I'm like, okay, no, I can see that perspective. I haven't ever heard an argument that I've really quite understood. And I think there's that misconception that if we start lifting weights, we get to that size of the body, the real bodybuilders. And it does not work like that. We don't have the naturally, we don't have the testosterone to build that muscle. That takes a lot of work. And, sometimes it's natural work and sometimes it's assisted work, but we don't carry that amount of testosterone. So I think actually for a lot of women, when we see the physiques that a lot of men and women would put in, what is attractive, that's often built in the weight section and not through cardio. So I think it's interesting that a lot of it is a misunderstanding as to what happens when women go and lift. But I think even from a health perspective, we want to be independent in our old age, which means we need to be able to bend over and tie our shoelaces, and we need to be able to carry our shopping and move things around. And that means that we need strength training as much as we need to keep our hearts healthy. And I think for women in particular, there's a lot of things around menopause, and when we reach a certain age, that there's certain things that our bodies do as part of the aging process, but strength training helps with. So I think there's a lot there, and I think women are more aware of that now, and I think that is helping. I'm certainly at the gym now seeing a lot of more older women in the weight section, so not just the younger girls in there. So I think it's good. I think it's really good to see. I think it is changing a little bit, but I think it's interesting. We've got pictures up here from when I was competing. And that funny story, my son had some friends round, and one of his mates was looking at the pictures and he went, "Oh my God, your mum's hench." And he didn't realize that I was here. And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And he's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And I was like, "No, it's a complete, like for me, that's a compliment to look like you train." I think when it didn't happen very often because I wasn't that big size, but no, occasionally people would say, "You look like you work out." And I was like, "I do, and I work really hard at it too, so thank you that you've noticed." But for a lot of people, you put your normal everyday work clothes on and you just look like the next person. It's just when people see the photographs or videos of you lifting a car at the weekend. And I competed for just over 2 years, and there were people that I worked with that had absolutely no idea. So I think people think that you suddenly walk around and you can't put your arms by your sides and you create this huge physique, whereas actually the majority of people had no idea. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there for sure.
Yeah, that's a great story. I was going to say, when your son's friends find out you can lift a car, all of a sudden the perception changes. So I want to transfer over to your career in the UK police service. 20 years in the police force. When did that start? Were you in your 20s when that started? And then
I was 18. So
wow. Okay.
literally straight out of school, did my A levels and started working at the local police station. Yeah, it was a bit of a wake up call because when you're 18, you think you know everything, don't you? And then you walk in, you realize that this whole world exists that you had no idea about. So, and I was front line as well, front desk. So working with the public, I think I'd been there a month when my exam results came through. So yeah, really young.
Was there where in the weight loss journey was that? Because was there here we call it a POPAT or a police officer physical activity test? Where was that in the weight loss journey at 18?
So that was before. So at
Okay.
that point, I wanted to apply. So I'd been doing all of the physical training ready for the assessment. So at that point, I was physically fit and well. And then I didn't get in. So I did apply, I didn't get in. And that's then when I met my son's dad. And that's when then the weight went right the way up and was there for a couple of years. And then came back down again. So was working in different departments at different times. So yeah, at that point when I first started, I was a pretty healthy, sporty, well, certainly healthy, fit 18-year-old.
Okay. And then on the timeline, and I'm trying to piece this all together, when did the lifting begin and when did you start competing in strongman competitions? At what age and during your police service time?
So I would have been in my teens by that point, and so you're never too old. Definitely a lesson to take away there, because I had my first little trophy at the age of 36, I think. So I would have been. It was my last the last 5 years of my service. So I was in senior leadership by then, and competing, working full time, and being a single parent. If you want something done, you ask a busy person, right?
Exactly. The 80-20 rule. 20% of the people are doing 80% of the work. Now I'm excited to talk about your competitive era in lifting. Year did that start? At what age did you start? But when did it really peak for you? And when were you at your strongest and really competing to become the strongest woman in the UK and then competing in international competition?
So it all happened really quickly. So when you were saying earlier about saying yes to opportunities, that's exactly what happened. So I kind of started the new year as everybody does, I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do this year. And all I said was, I'm just going to say yes to things because I felt like I'd missed out over the period of the marriage and then the years that followed. I felt like I'd just with that lack of confidence and everything else, I felt like I was missing out on stuff. So is that right? This year, I'm just going to say yes. If whatever happens, I'm going to say yes and worry about it afterwards. And it was the craziest year. I did some really, really fun stuff that year. So I learned some jujitsu myself, did some martial arts training. I went on holiday on my own. I did one of the paragliding off a cliff over the Blue Lagoon in Turkey. Whatever people said to me, do you want to do this? I was saying yes to. And that's how the Strongwoman then came about. So I was at the gym. Somebody who I was training with said, they're doing an open day at one of the gyms. Will you come with me? Okay, yes. So we get down there. They've got the equipment out. We're like having a go with the equipment. And as we're leaving, the guy that runs the gym said, I'm going to put a competition on in a couple of months' time. Will you sign up? Okay, yes. So that's literally how it happened. So saying yes to she could have asked anybody, but she asked me, I said yes. Then go down there. And as we're leaving, he's talking about putting a competition on. So my first competition was in the November. So I think that was when I was 36. So I had been training in the gym for a little while at that point and then ended up coming, I think, fifth in that first competition. The week after, I had a phone call from another gym just in a different city saying, they had a competition. They were running a competition the following week. They'd had a couple of people pull out through illness and through injury. Would I be interested in jumping in last minute? Okay, yes. And that's when I then came third and had my first little mini trophy. And then off the back of that, my PT said, well, you're doing all right at a local level. Why don't we put you in for a regional competition and see what happens? Okay, yes.
There you go.
That, and then I got the final qualifying spot in regionals. That took me to England's I came fourth, which qualified me for Britain's I came second, is when it got really real, and that qualified me for Europe's. So Europe's Strongest Woman was a year after my first ever competition.
Wow.
So
And may I ask how you did at Europe's
I
competition?
came eighth at Europe's
Okay.
out of 8.
And so are the women
It was a
competing?
very different environment.
Yeah, I bet. So are the women competing at the European Championships? Are those the competitors that we would see on TV, when it comes to the international strong woman competitions?
Yeah. So the women that were competing at Europe's are the ones that often then go on to compete at Worlds. There's a
See,
very, very different environment.
it seems to be quite popular in many countries, but particularly in the UK. When my wife and I we actually watch a woman competition on ESPN here in North America, and almost everybody was from Britain, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. So it seems to be very popular in your region of the world. Maybe I'm misconstruing that, but there is definitely a popularity there for that. What are some of the weights that these women are lifting, pushing, and pulling, and what are your best marks? And I realize that every event's a little different, so it's not like just a straight. It's not like powerlifting where it's straight bench, squat, and deadlift. I mean, you're lifting a car off a a levered system, or you've got the yoke walk, which looks horrible on the shoulders and.
It's as horrible as it looks.
Like my shoulders are wrecked, and I saw you do where you're lifting and walking the yoke around in a circle, and I was just like, I just wanted to lie down in pain because it just looked horrible. But tell me about the experience of just competing and some of the exercises and some of the events that you do, and explain it to our listeners what this is like.
So the thing with Strong Women is that there's always 5 events in a competition. They normally tell you what the events are about 6 weeks out. So when you're training, you train for everything. So it's not like powerlifting where you're training for the 3 lifts. You have to have that all-round body strength. You also, a lot of people will do powerlifting and strong woman, but with strong women there's the moving events as well, and that was where my strength was the moving events rather than the static lifting events. So I loved those events, things like the truck pull and the car lifts, or anything that was a little bit different. I definitely enjoyed a whole lot more. I think that's my inner child coming through as well. So I really enjoyed the training, and again, this is what you're talking about, the effort over results. I enjoyed the journey. I enjoyed the training. The competitions was just a part of it, but it, whereas some of the competitors are very much like, this is the competition and everything is focused on them winning or at least getting on the platform at the competition. Whereas I think for me, my approach was a little bit more, well, I'm really enjoying training. So then when we get to the competition day, it's just a case of me versus me. What can I go and do to beat what I've done before, rather than what's everybody else doing and what do I need to beat? So I really enjoyed the mix of the training. I trained with some amazing guys who were great fun to train with. But I loved the car deadlift, the yoke. I loved. There's something. Weightlifting is very empowering. There's something it's the mental challenge versus the physical challenge. It's that telling yourself that you can do it before you even put the weight in your hands. The Atlas stone, which is the one that everybody knows, because it's the final event. There's something about that as well, because it uses pretty much every muscle in your body and your central nervous system. So it's almost a deadlift into your lap. Then you put your hands in over the top, and it's like a power move to like boost it up. And then once it's on your chest, you can't take a breath. So there's a timing of the pop and a breath, and then it sits on your chest. So you can't mess about with it. You've got to move quite quickly, because otherwise gravity starts to pull it down. Tends to take the skin with you, and you've got to get it on a platform that is normally a little bit higher than your chest level, unless you're at the advantage of being taller, in which case that helps. This is where you want longer legs and some height to be able to help. But there was so much about it that it was difficult. You know, it wasn't nothing about it is easy. Nothing about it comes easy. And I loved the challenge of looking at the competitions and thinking, I can't do any of that right now. Okay, let's see where we can go in 8 weeks of 8 weeks of training and 8 weeks of trying. And that constant failure initially that then starts to bring that little bit of hope where you start to think, I think actually I might be able to do this, to then getting close to the competition and then smashing it on competition day. There's something about that I don't know that I've experienced that anywhere else, but there's that definite reward for the effort that you put in, because you can't do it, and you've got 10 weeks, 12 weeks to put the work in and see how close you can get. And a lot of people will tell you that the aim is to not zero the events on, just get one rep on competition day, then I'm winning. And I think I loved that mental push of, the clock's ticking and you've still got to follow the plan. You've still got to do what your trainer's telling you to do and trust the process. But it's that mental battle versus the physical battle. And there was something about that just brought everything together for me. And it just gave me that. I think it's just helped me to see that, and like it's almost that anything is possible. I think, well, if I can, you go into work the next day after you've been lifting a car, and it's almost like, well, I can definitely speak up in a meeting, and I can definitely disagree with somebody else. It's almost, it just kind of almost feels unstoppable, but in a good way.
I think I want to say that I quoted this, but confidence is built through action. Action does not come from having confidence. And I think it's important, and I want to go back to what you had said earlier, but individual sports in particular, and you had said the competition day actually, I'm not going to say you said it was anticlimactic, but basically the competition day it just was what it was. You enjoyed the journey. It was the work to get to competition day. And I think competition day really just was another opportunity to now test what you've been working on against yourself. And individual sports really it really embodies the effort over results mantra, because when you show up in competition day, you can only do what you've prepared yourself to do.
Yeah.
And if you get a PR, personal record, fantastic. If you don't, you could still win. You don't know. You can't control how the other competitors compete and how they perform. You can only control yourself. My daughter had lost a swimming race. She came in dead last, 8th in the pool, competing against older girls. But in the process, she broke the age record for 50-meter breaststroke. But she was so devastated she had lost the race. And then I told her, you broke the record. And she's like, and that's the same thing. Like, you might break your own personal records at a competition and still come in 4th.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I love about that. It's just you against you. And that competition day basically is the report card now for you to go back into the gym, back into your diet, back into your nutrition and your protocols, and go, okay, I need to change this. I need to improve this. I need to stop doing this. That's what that competition really is. Don't get me wrong. Being on the podium is awesome, but just because you're not on the podium doesn't mean you didn't win.
Facts. So true. So I say to people, courage comes before confidence. So you have to have the courage to take the action. So it feeds into what you were saying, because the action builds evidence, and the evidence builds that inner confidence. So I think, I completely agree with that. But
whatever action is,
where your focus is, you can focus on where you're failing, or you can focus where you're making progress.
Yep. And whatever that action is, at least it's not inaction. Because inaction is to me, as a parent, as a coach, as an educator, and even in my coaching now today with clients, inaction is not, it's not an option. Like, even if you're going to move forward and fail at it, whatever, but at least you move forward, right? Mm-hmm. And you learn from that thing that you didn't accomplish. And I don't like to use the term failure, because failure is only when you just quit. And when you just quit and give up, that's the only failure there truly is. You can lose every competition, but as long as you still keep coming back, because when it comes to life and when it comes to business, especially when we work with our clients, right? It's an infinite game. You don't win. There's no end to it.
Yeah.
you just keep competing, whether it be physically as yourself or in business when you own a business, or you just continue to learn, you continue to get better and to keep going forward, but there's no real end point there. So on that statement, let me change over to your competitive era and how that now has transformed you into a leadership, a performance coach, working with your clients with Phoenix, and explain that transition for us, because I want to understand what motivated you now to go into working with your clients, with one-to-one, with people to help them in their transformational journey.
I think when I did 20 years in the police, it kind of all kind of came to that sweet spot all at the right time, really. So I was in a senior leadership role, 20 years in service. I had a secondary role as a self-development trainer, and I was coaching and mentoring other people that were coming up in their leadership roles. So, and at the same time, I was also competing. So at the point where I got told that my role was being made redundant, in terms of everything that was going on in my world at the moment, at that time, it led to coaching, mentoring, training. And I had that option. I was like, okay, do I go and find a job elsewhere? I'd never worked for anybody else. Or do I take all of the bits that I've been really enjoying and create a business? And I laugh now because there was a huge sense of naivety around that as to what is required to run a business. However, it was definitely the best decision. So I think for me, it's always been about potential. It's always been about helping people to get to that next level, whatever that is for them. And I think the performance element, when I look at, if you look at on the surface, I work with people, as most coaches do, is that under the surface, the subconscious, like, so your beliefs, your values, the way you think, the way you feel, the way your subconscious is wired. We do that work under the surface, but on the surface level, we also need the frameworks and the strategies and the things that put things in place and hold things in place. So I think for me, when I look at all of my personal experiences, as well as all the training that I've done, it leads to being able to support people with that higher performance. So whether I take my experiences through the sport, whether I take my experiences through being a leader, whether I take my experiences of being a business owner, all of it is around the habits, the behaviors, and the mindset of what helps people to get to that next level. And that can be applied anywhere. When you look at what do the most successful people do, and we apply that to the day-to-day people who want to be better in the job that they're in, or make improvements in their business, or be a better parent or a better partner. We can take what we learn from the people who are the most successful in their field, and we can apply that in that day-to-day. So I think for me, it's just the habits, the habits, the behaviors, the mindset that's going to help you to get to that next level. But the important thing for me is about the aligned success, because success is really important. And I work with really ambitious, really successful people, but unless it aligns with what's important to you in life, it doesn't feel like it should feel. And I think success should feel how you want it to feel. So I think for me, the important thing is not just about helping you get to the next level. It's about making sure that that next level also aligns with what's most important to you in terms of your values and in terms of your principles and your ethics and all of those things that are really important, and not just about being successful, because life's more than that.
Yeah. You had said success is how you feel successful, not other people's idea of what success is. Love that, because there's a saying that, comparison is the thief of joy. And this is something that, when you spend, as the better part of your life competing, as I have in sports, as you have, and a lot of people do, and some people just compete in business, or they're just competitive in general, but you're constantly comparing yourself. And now in the day and age of social media, where now we get to compare ourselves to millions of people, and it's unfortunate for young children because they haven't grown that brain power to understand the difference, and a lot of adults haven't either. That comparison is what is really stopping you from being the best you can be. And I know that sounds so cliche, and it sounds like a platitude, but really that's all you can do. All you can do is put effort into yourself to become the best you can be, but it doesn't happen overnight. That's not life.
Yeah.
And it's important for people to know that every day can be a win. It can be little wins. It can be you got up and made your bed. Okay, we've done that 30 days in a row, and now it's become a habit. For people who are trying to lose weight, okay, stop with drinking sugary drinks. Just one little thing. Those are all wins. And I think we need to stop thinking that the win has to be something that you post to Instagram and get 100 likes on because you had this grand idea of what success is. So I love what you said about success is how you see success. One of the central parts of your coaching work is the concept of self-leadership. What is self-leadership? Define that for me.
I think it comes up in different ways in different conversations. For me, the self-leadership is that how you are leading yourself, the decisions that you make. It's aligning your life and the decisions. It's showing up with intention, it's showing up with purpose. It's aligning the way you show up with the things that are most important to you, your ethics, your values, your principles. It comes down to that all the time. And I think when we don't lead ourselves, we end up going in the flow of somebody else's current. And I think it's so easy to do when we, especially if you're a chill person, you're pretty laid back, no, that's fine. We'll just do what you want to do. But that is great, but it means that you're not going to end up where you want to go. And I think it's really important. Yeah, I think you have to make the decision that's best for you and then lead and have that courage to lead yourself on that path and stay on that path, even when everything else might be a little bit chaotic around you or other people think that something else is best for you. I have this conversation a lot where people say, well, I could do this. Oh, well, you could. Do you want to? Just because you can doesn't mean that that's what you have to do. What's most important to you? What is it that you want? And I think we could probably ask ourselves that question a little bit more. Okay, this is an option, but what is it that I want? And how does this align with what's most important to me? Because I speak to a lot of people who come to me and say, it all looks really good on paper, but it doesn't feel how I want it to feel. I thought it was going to feel different. Or, business is great, but I'm not, I haven't been at home for bedtime for the kids all week, or I've missed this, or I've lost out on that. And so I think that self-leadership is really calling out what's most important to us and holding that line and staying on that path. And it's tough sometimes because there's a lot of other things going on that can influence and potentially lead us off in a different direction. For me, that's the self-leadership is around having the courage and the confidence to stay on the path that aligns with what's most important to you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So I mentioned before that we live in a world that's obsessed with outcomes. People just want to see the result. They don't care about your journey. I mean, maybe I'm being a bit harsh when I say that, but really they just want to see what the final product is and what you achieved. So how do you in the people you work with, and it sounds like you work with people in different arenas, different fields, how do you keep those people focused on the process and just the discipline of doing the same thing day after day after day and getting them over, let's call it, getting it over that hump? How do you keep them focused on that before they give up?
It's interesting that we talk about the results. I'm not sure. I don't know. I've never spoken to anyone on their deathbed, but I'm pretty sure on the deathbed, people don't list off their achievements. They list off memories and they list off the things that have happened along the way or the impact that they've had on other people. So the kind of common theme of the people that I work with, they're impact led. So they tend to work in businesses or in fields that create impact. I think that's probably reflective of my public sector background, but also in coaching as well. They're people who are motivated by creating impact, making a difference. So if we can tap into that motivation and we can keep them onto their why, that can really make a difference. The framework that I use with my clients is the PIPS framework. So it's plan, intention, identity, performance, and structure. So we have the plan. So for a lot of people, the planning is the easy bit. Not for me. I like to take the action. I have to remind myself that I need to put some effort into the planning. But for a lot of people, planning is easy. The intention is making sure that it aligns with your values, that is what you want. It's not what somebody else wants. It is what you want. And how does it line up with that sense of purpose and creating the impact and the things that are most important to you? Identity is as James Clear says, we are who every action that we take is a vote for who we are becoming. So the identity, we have lots of conversations around who do you need to be to make this happen? How are you evolving as a human to help to make this happen? Performance is around the discipline and the motivation. So we look at what works for you, because everybody is slightly different. So what is it that's motivating you? How do you remain disciplined? What works really well for you? What habits do you need to have? What behaviors are you bringing in? And then the structure is everything that holds that in place. So planning and structure tends to be the two biggest sticking points. So a lot of people are really good at planning, but they forget to put the structure in place to support the plan. And other people have structure, but they have the lack of detail in the plan. So when you line all of those 5 things up together, they all work really well together. In quite often, if somebody's having a bit of a wobble, we can normally work out which one of those is getting a little bit loose. And that's what we then can hone in on in the coaching session to say, right, okay, how do we make this sturdier to help you to keep going and keep that momentum going?
That's awesome. I love that. Is that something you came up with yourself? Did you see it and you modified it? Because that's number one, the acronym's awesome. But how did you come up with PIPS?
So it's an interesting story. I'll try and keep it short. I did a podcast recording. So I was out in Cyprus working away, and I was did a podcast recording, and the person asked me, what is it that makes me different? So he was asking about my journey, and he said, how is it that so what would floor a lot of people? How is it that you didn't just pick yourself up, but you made things even better? So like, you didn't just lose weight, you became a competitive athlete. You didn't just come through redundancy, you've created a successful business. He said, what is it that you do? And I remembered laughing it off and saying, well, I don't know. I just did it. And then I went for this walk. So the amazing hills in Cyprus, and I love walking out there. And I had my headphones on, and this question just kept coming back to me. And I was like, well, there must be something. Like, there must be something that I've done. What's the difference that makes the difference? And it just kept going over and over and over. So I started making notes in my phone. So PIPS I was like, okay, what do I always do? I always like create a plan, because I'm like, one of my sayings is like, it is what it is. Like, I can't do anything about it. So what do I do next? We plan to how to get out of it and how to move on. Okay, I'm always talking about intentions and being very purposeful. I'm always talking about like the motivation and discipline that always comes up. People say, you're so consistent. And we get pop-ups on social media. This is what you were doing a year ago and 3 years ago and 5 years ago. It's always the same thing, which is why I never share it, because I'm such a creature of habit.
Yeah.
And it's like structure. People ask me about, how do you make it all happen? Like, how did you work full time and train 15 hours a week and raise a child? Like, because I'm organized, because I've got good time management. And I was like, it was a very long walk. I walked for about an hour and a half up and down through the hills, and I've still got the drawing of where I was like, okay, well, the intention flows all the way through it. The structure goes underneath and holds it in place. And then you've got your plan and the performance that sits in the middle. And just suddenly it kind of made sense. And I was like, well, if it works for me, would that work for other people? So when I came back from Cyprus, I spoke to a couple of my clients and was like, look, I've been playing about with this framework. Can we apply it in a session to see if it works for you? And that was 2020, so it was only beginning of last year, but I've been using it ever since. And yeah, it's worked really well. But I also like the PIPS, sowing the seeds of success. Those seeds are really important. And if you get that right, everything else can fall into place.
Love that story. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that, because you had said this is long. No, it wasn't. It was beautiful.
Let's keep this short.
And you know, when people say, well, it is what it is, some people hate that saying because they find it dismissive. Like, well, it is what it is. But it is. Like, I can only do what I did. I can only contribute whatever my effort was. And how it turns out is just, it is what it is.
I think
So,
the is what it is can feel dismissive, but the is what it is what helps you to draw a line under it and move on. So if you can't do anything about it, at some point, all of the reflection and the journaling and the meditation and the talking about it, it's going to help you to a point, but it's not going to change anything. So I think for me, that the is what it is like it is a self-assurance in a way that's almost like, it is what it is. I'll work it out. And if I can make it even better, then I'm going to do that too. So it's almost like I'm not going to spend time worrying about what's gone on, because that for me is wasted energy. I would rather focus forwards and work that bit out.
yeah, yeah. Um, let's start to wrap up here. I want to talk a little bit about your philanthropic endeavors. You sponsor, support women's sports teams. What does that, what does that look like, and why is that so important to you?
So I do a lot of work with younger people because I think both my son and my sister work in the education system and they do an amazing job. I don't think the education system is fit for purpose in terms of teaching life skills. So where I can get involved in that, I do. So I do work with a local CIC, which is great because they put me in a room with young people who've overcome some incredible things, and then I help them to take that adversity, take who they are and their character, and then help them with those life skills that's just going to help them to use all of that experience into something amazing moving forward. So I love doing that, love getting involved with young people, and it's like through sports as well. So I think, I can go and speak to the junior basketball team, and I can talk about on court mindset, and I can talk about confidence on court, but I also know that that's going to work off court, and it's going to help them with their exams, and it's going to help them with having conversations with their parents, and it's going to help them with all the sticky teenage life stuff that they've got to go through. Yeah. But if I do it through the filter of sport, and if I turn up and say, this is going to help you to be a better player, it's much easier to get that information through to them. But I also know that it's going to work off court as well. And I think women in sport, I think we're moving in the right direction. It's picking up some pace. But you only have to look at the comment section to know that we are not there yet. If you look at any comment section of any women achieving in sport, and we know we're not there yet. So there's a lot of work to do, but I think that's my way of, if I can support in that way, then I think that, help, you talked about women competing internationally, that takes finances, that takes support, and a lot of them are juggling parenting and working and everything else. So if I can help from a coaching perspective, I will, and if I can sponsor from a financial perspective to help them get there, then I will. So it's just a little bit of payback, I guess.
Nice. One other initiative you're involved with, I believe, is Purposeful Pathways.
Yes.
Tell us about that. What drew you to the project? What kind of transformations have you seen there?
This is my favorite thing to do. We've just this week actually gone and met the new nominees for this year. But the incredible thing was the nominees from last year. So the young people that did Purposeful Pathways with me last year were all at the event this week and supporting the new group coming through. And it was so great to see, because I was talking to them and saying, like, remember this was you last year? And they were like, oh, like life feels like it's changed so much. So I mean, so with Purposeful Pathways, it's a local project here in Bristol. And it starts off where people can nominate young people who've done amazing things. So either overcome some adversity, or they've done fundraising, or they're a carer, or they've worked really hard in school, or they support a local charity. So they're young people who have done more than we would expect somebody in their situation to have done. I mean, the awards ceremony is I wouldn't describe myself as a particularly emotional person, but I mean, every year I'm like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. They're just incredible stories. So what we then do is we take the nominees and they get offered to work with me over sort of September through to December. And we do workshops with them on a Saturday morning. They come in and we do things like helping them to understand what their core values are, helping them with different communication skills, helping them understand mindset and how their brain works and why they respond to things in the way they do, help them with their confidence and talk to them about what the comfort zone looks like and why you retreat and why you push forward, and help them to see what they've already achieved and how they can use that even more, like the skills and tools they've now got in the toolbox even more. These are young people that are going to go on to do incredible things because they've just got this mindset and resilience that, yeah, it's a shame that they have to have that mindset and resilience, but life has dealt them the cards and they have played the best hand. That's the best way of describing it.
Nice. Is there a online website for Purposeful Pathways at all?
Yes, it's all comes under Community of Purpose, which is a CIC, which is run by a lady called Amy Kington. And so she runs a number of things in Bristol. So she's got the Break Free program, which helps hunger in the holidays. So the children that normally get free school meals, she runs sports clubs so that they can have the activities and school meals. They do a great football tournament where they pair up children that are in private schools with children that are in schools in some of the more challenging areas, and they do a football tournament together. So a lot of it is breaking down some of the misconceptions so that they realize they've got more in common than they've got differences. So they play sport together, they all get together, but also just increasing the opportunities for some of these children that they wouldn't normally have. So they go on an exchange to France, and then they play a football tournament in France, and that's all sponsored and supported by companies within Bristol. So it's an amazing thing to be a part of.
Excellent.
So yeah, community of purpose is
Community of Purpose. Excellent. A couple questions to wrap up here. And I'm out of curiosity for myself, in your competitive years in Strongwoman competitions, who was the strongest competitor you ever saw where your jaw just dropped? Like, I can't believe this.
So, I mean, the two women that were both at Europe's, so the two UK women, Zoe Thompson and Donna Moore, both have gone on to win World's Strongest Woman since. And I'm still in touch more with Andrea than Donna, but I have spoken to Donna more recently. They're just incredible women. I mean, they're both parents. They're both raising teenagers, which is the challenge in itself. They both work. And you just think the amount of, for them to still be going, all of this time, I mean, that just takes something else. So Andrea has a couple of the world records. In fact, actually at the last World's Strongest Woman, she broke the deadlift record, and then Lucy Underdown stepped on stage 2 minutes after and broke it again. Oh. But she's got the overhead log and I think the elephant bar deadlift. It's in hundreds and hundreds of I think her overhead is 220 kilos. It's ridiculous, ridiculously strong. I was nowhere near.
That's near 500 pounds for those of you who need the translation. That's almost 500 pounds.
I think their deadlifts are getting on for, I'm trying to think I think the last deadlift was around the 300 kilo mark as well. So it's stronger than your average, but also great women too. Great ambassadors for the sport.
Yeah. What's a book that you've read, a quote, a podcast you listened to, or something that really influenced you, let's say even in the last couple of years, that you read, listened to, that was like, I need to add that into my coaching, or I need to add that into my life?
So The Chimp Paradox was one of the first books that I read around mindset. So Dr. Steve Peters, that was a great book for me. I think for understanding what goes on in our brain and why we do what we do. Carol Dweck's growth mindset I loved for the case studies.
That's how I started.
Okay, so I'm not a sciencey person, so I found with the Chimp Paradox, when we start talking about the brain and parts of the brain, I call the different parts of the brain lots of different names because I can never remember the science bits. So I call the amygdala your security guard, you know, and I say
There you
some
go.
people have got a very hyper-focused security guard going on that wants to see danger in everything. But Carol Dweck, I loved the storytelling of the case studies because it just meant it all landed for me. Trying to think what other ones. Those are the two that I tend to recommend. I mean, James Clear's Atomic Habits for me made it all make sense, and I was surprised at how much I was already talking about that he had different names for. Yeah, I think Vanessa Van Edwards' Cues is one that I've read more recently for leadership and communication. Really interesting book. So she talks about warmth and competence and how, you know, good leaders will lead with warmth and then prove competence. So it's very interesting. She talks about body language and different communication skills, but she's actually been on Diary of a CEO podcast very recently.
Stephen Bartlett, yes.
Yeah. His book was very good too, actually. And I enjoyed his book. I like to do audiobooks while I'm out walking. I would say those are probably the top ones of more recent.
Excellent. Well, let's go here. Where can people find you? What are your current projects that you want people to know about? How can we promote you and help get the word out about what you're doing over there in UK?
So if you put my name in, zoethompson.uk, that's where you'll find the website, and all of the socials are linked on there. I'm in all of the places you would expect to find me, and YouTube as well. So I will, when this gets released, I will add some comments in to make it nice and easy for people to find me. But it's always nice to talk to people. There's free resources on the website. There's videos on YouTube that will talk about lots of the things that we've talked about today. So yeah, it'd be good to connect with people.
Wonderful. Zoe Thompson, thank you very much for being here today. I'm sure our audience got a lot from our conversation, and I think it's important for people to know that leadership and what comes with that comes in many different forms. It can be in the sports arena, it can be in the boardroom, it can be in the educational institutions, but I think anyone can be a leader, and you're certainly proving that in your life story and your journey, which it just showed that you can not know what you're going to do when you're younger, and you could try to figure it out and maybe not know then even, and it is what it is. And you just keep moving forward, keep doing things, keep taking opportunities and saying yes. I loved what you said about that. It's like, I just said yes. I just said, okay, yes, we'll do this. And that's what I think where leadership is formed and confidence is formed. It's from trying so many different things, learning from it, and it starts to build the puzzle of who you are. So thank you for your story today, Zoe, and I hope you enjoyed being on the show today.
I've loved it. It's been such a great conversation. I know I really appreciate your time and for inviting me on. It's been good.